What's up everybody, welcome to another episode of China Update, where I try and help you guys keep on top of the world's #2 economy. My name is Tony, it's been a busy week, let's jump in. So in the PRC we've been following the rhetoric around common prosperity, this idea of common prosperity, for about a month now, and we're now beginning to see real world policies be introduced. So first up, let's have a look at a few of these policies that were rolled out this week. In a statement on Tuesday, the Housing Ministry in Beijing said that it aims to control growth in urban rent levels to, quote, no more than 5% per year, end quote, as it is, quote, seeking to ensure a balanced supply and demand in the rental market, end quote. So rent controls are to be introduced. One aspect of common prosperity, according to state media, is the idea of quote-unquote tertiary distribution. This is the idea of redistribution of income through wealthy households and businesses giving to charity. So we're talking about philanthropic endeavors here. Economists have pointed out, however, that even with high levels of philanthropic giving, this mechanism is very limited when it comes to rebalancing income and wealth levels. Quote, to get some context, for tertiary distribution to increase the income of non-rich households by 0.5 percentage point of GDP, businesses and the wealthy will have to contribute 80 to 90 billion a year to very efficient charities, end quote. Despite this, it is the expectation of the state that companies, particularly private companies, get behind this new call for tertiary distribution. It was announced this week that Alibaba, Jack Ma's Alibaba, for example, pledged $15.5 billion for a, quote, common prosperity fund, end quote. On Thursday, General Secretary Xi Jinping announced that the People's Republic of China will set up a new stock exchange in Beijing, giving the capital more influence in the world of business and finance. The General Secretary said that he wanted to create a venue for, quote, service-orientated and innovative businesses, particularly small and medium enterprises. Now, China already has 2 stock exchanges on the mainland, located in Shanghai and Shenzhen. The Shanghai Stock Exchange hosts mostly large-cap companies, state-owned enterprises, banks, and energy firms. The Shenzhen Stock Exchange hosts technology companies and many small and medium-sized firms. Many mainland companies are also listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, subject to its own British-style legal and regulatory systems and free from mainland capital controls. Well, for now at least. The announcement looks like it is part of Beijing's medium-term strategy of making Chinese companies list on the mainland or in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region exchanges and pull the gravity of global capital markets more towards China. On Monday, General Secretary Xi Jinping chaired the Central Conference on Ethnic Affairs. This is the first time this conference has been held in 7 years. State-run media covered the event. Quote, Xi Jinping has stressed consolidating the sense of community for the Chinese nation and unswervingly taking the correct approaches with Chinese characteristics to handling ethnic affairs when addressing the Central Conference on Ethnic Affairs. The historical position of the party's ethnic work in the new area must be understood from the strategic perspective of national rejuvenation, she said. Only through fostering a sense of community for the Chinese nation and all ethnic groups jointly safeguarding national security and social stability can the infiltration and subversion of extremist and separatist thoughts be resisted and the aspiration of the people of all ethnic groups for a better life be fulfilled, she said. All ethnic groups should be guided to always place the interests of the Chinese nation above anything else. Neither Han chauvinism, 大汉族主义, a softer term for Han Chinese supremacy, nor ethno-nationalism among minorities is conducive to the development of a community for the Chinese nation. End quote. We need to ask, when looking at this sort of statement then, what exactly is the Chinese nation? Or at least how does the party define the Chinese nation? The Mandarin term for the Chinese nation or the Chinese race is 中华民族. 中华民族 has its roots in the final years of the multi-ethnic Manchu Qing Empire and developed during the early Republican and Nationalist periods 1912 through 1949 to include Han Chinese people and 4 major non Han ethnic groups: the Manchus, the Mongols, the Muslim Hui people of the interior, and the Tibetans. It is thus a modern political concept developed to construct a unifying racial identity. Though initially he had flirted with ideas of Han Chinese supremacy and anti-Manchu racial cleansing ideas, Dr. Sun Zhongshan, or Sun Yat-sen as he is known in the West, later used this conceptualization to develop his idea of the Republic of the Five Races, or the Union of the Five Races. And this idea can be seen in the 5 colors of the national flag used from 1912 through to 1928, with each color representing one of these 5 races. 中华民族 was initially rejected in the People's Republic of China, established in 1949, which saw itself as a multinational communist state with a greater focus on class identity, thus the People's Republic, rather than, say, the Republic of the Chinese nation. However, after Mao's death, the concept of 中华民族 became popular in the People's Republic of China and was redefined to include the majority Han Chinese ethnic group, as well as 55 other ethnic minority groups. In the 1980s, the PRC ethnic policy documents changed the terminology from the Chinese people, 中国人民, as in the People's Republic of China, to the Chinese nation, 中华民族. So we can see that this idea of the Chinese nation is a relatively new political concept, though many elements of it are rooted in much older concepts repurposed by modern intellectuals. Now, this is an incredibly brief and very oversimplified explanation of this concept, the Chinese nation, but something that one could write a book on, and many have, but it's enough for our purposes to understand here. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button. It's a huge help for a small YouTuber, particularly when discussing sensitive material, because YouTube is hesitant to recommend it. So it's a much harder grind to get these videos shown to more people. So a like really helps. And if you do find that there is some value to these episodes, I only release one a week. If you hit the subscribe button and notification bell, then you'll be reminded of these episodes when they're released every weekend. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for supporting a small channel like mine. It's truly humbling to have your guys' support. Thank you so much. Cheers. On Wednesday, the National Press and Publication Administration, the PRC regulator for video games, issued a new rule that restricts how much time young gamers in China are allowed to play video games. The new rule states that people under 18 years of age will be allowed to play online video games only on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and legal holidays for 1 hour between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. This limits minors to 3 hours of online gaming per week, which is much shorter a period of time than the previous policy that limited gaming online to 13.5 hours per week. This move should be seen in the context of a broader movement or crackdown, clamping down rather, on the entertainment industry that we've been seeing unfold in the PRC over the last couple of months. Quote, "Literature and the art is by no means simply singing, dancing and playing, but an important front for cultural and ideological work, an important part of superstructure," here using a Marxist terminology, "and extremely important work for the party. If capital is allowed to expand in a disorderly manner in entertainment, we will lose the role of literature and art in serving the people and socialism, destroying the spirit of the Chinese nation." End quote. On Thursday, the two government ministries and key party agencies in the mainland published new guidelines for the entertainment industry. The notice was highly critical of the industry for, quote, "severely polluting the social atmosphere," end quote, and, quote, "misleading the young," end quote. The notice expressed that actors who engage in unethical behavior and agencies and companies that condone such behavior should be severely punished. It also called on party cadres at all levels to, quote unquote, "deeply recognize the importance of," quote, "molding future generations," end quote. There has been a very interesting development this week, which has sparked a lot of domestic and international discussion. An anti-American, anti-capitalist and nationalist opinion piece published by Neo-Maoist blogger was reposted online by major leading state-run media outlets, including the People's Daily, Xinhua News, PLA, People's Liberation Army Daily, CCTV, China Youth Daily, China News Service, and other major publications. This suggests that the reposting of this blogger's piece was ordered by the leadership of state-run media and may be higher. This may mean the piece represents the view of key decision makers at the highest levels. If so, some may find the points discussed in the piece somewhat concerning. For the quote of the week, we're going to look at some of this commentary. I've edited this for brevity, but this deals with some of the main themes discussed in the piece. The piece is titled, quote, "Everyone can feel it. A profound change is taking place," end quote. This is the commentary. Quote, "This change will wash away all the filth. The capital market will no longer be a paradise for capitalists to get rich overnight. The entertainment industry will no longer turn out effeminate, sissy boys as stars. The news and public opinion will no longer worship at the altar of Western culture. We return to our red roots. We return to heroism. We return to bloody strength. From the suspension of ants listings, to the central government's ratification of economic order and anti-monopoly work, to Alibaba's fine of 18.2 billion yuan, and Didi's investigation, to the central government's grand commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the founding of the party, which put forward the road of common prosperity, and a series of recent rectification actions against the chaos in entertainment circles, all tell us that China is undergoing major changes, and a profound change or revolution is taking place in the economic, financial, cultural, and political fields. This profound change is also a return to the initial aspirations of the Communist Party of China, a return to people as the center, and a return to the essence of socialism. Although we won't kill the rich, we need to effectively solve the problem of the income gap between the rich and the poor, which is getting worse. Common prosperity means that ordinary workers can get more income in the distribution of social wealth. At present, China is facing an increasingly severe and complex international environment. The United States is implementing increasingly severe military threats, economic and technological blockades, financial strikes, and political and diplomatic encirclement against China, and is waging biological warfare, cyber warfare, public opinion warfare, and space warfare against China, with increasing efforts to launch a color revolution against China through a fifth column within China itself. If at this time we still rely on capitalists as the main force against imperialism and hegemony, and continue to let our young generation lose their toughness and virility through the vile decadence of the entertainment industry, then we will fall, just like the Soviet Union did back in the day, letting the country collapse, letting the country's wealth be looted, and letting the people fall into a deep disaster. Therefore, the profound changes that are currently taking place in China are precisely to deal with the current severe and complex international situation, and precisely to deal with the savage and ferocious attacks that the United States has begun to launch against China." End quote. Now remember, this piece was written by a blogger, but it was reprinted in leading state-run publications across the board earlier in the week. Now let's take this opportunity to look at two responses critical of this piece by Chinese commentators within the mainland later in the week. The first is from a liberal economist at China's top university, my alma mater, Peking University, who published a piece in the Chinese Economists 50 forum criticizing the common prosperity policy generally. Quote, "If we strengthen our confidence in the market economy and continue to push forward market-oriented reforms, China will move towards common prosperity. If we lose our faith in the market and introduce more and more government intervention, China will only go into common poverty." End quote. Now, interestingly, another figure who came out against this piece this week is Hu Xijin, the outspoken ultra-nationalist editor of the state-run Global Times. Now remember, this piece was reshared by top central government state-run media, so by publicly criticizing it, Hu Xijin is showcasing a split in mainstream state media messaging. This is what he said to his over 20 million followers online in a piece titled, Quote, "It is an error and misleading to preach that a profound revolution is taking place in China." End quote. This is some of what he wrote. Quote, "I think this article made inaccurate descriptions and employed exaggerated and misleading language which deviate from key national policies. Accelerating economic and social development as we promote common prosperity and strengthening fairness and justice is simply reform. It is not revolution. I'm concerned that such language will invoke certain historical memories and potentially trigger a degree of ideological confusion and panic. I hope everyone believes that China's reforms and opening up road will not be deviated from and not be fooled by extremist interpretations of national regulatory measures." End quote. This week, the new People's Republic of China ambassador to the United States gave his first major speech in his capacity as ambassador. For those interested in China-US relations, which should be most people, since I believe at least it's the most important bilateral relationship in the world today, it's important that we look at Beijing's articulation of the relationship. So here are some parts of the ambassador's speech. Quote, "Now the China-US relationship has come to another historical juncture, and it faces a very severe situation. The extreme China policy of the previous US administration has caused serious damage to our relations, and such a situation has not changed. There are three wrong beliefs on China-US relations in the United States. Some people believe that China is betting against America, and China's goal is to challenge and dispute America. This is a serious misjudgment of China's strategic intention. Some people believe that America needs to deal with China from the position of strength. They think America can win the new Cold War against China, just as it defeated the Soviet Union. Some people believe that cooperation is being phased out by competition and confrontation. This is a very misleading perception for the prospects of China-US relations." He then laid out some of his recommendations for improving the China-US relationship. Quote, "First, the two sides should be clear about each other's bottom lines and show mutual respect. Second, the two sides should maintain dialogue and manage differences. Third, the two sides should remove disturbances and focus on cooperation." End quote. So, of course, we can see that the PRC still maintains its position that the current poor relationship between China and the United States is entirely the fault of the United States, and it is up to the United States to fix it. This is a message that is unlikely going to be very effective in Washington in the current atmosphere. Yang Jiechi, China's top diplomat, higher even than Foreign Minister Wang Yi, meeting with the US Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry via video link on Thursday, expressed the same sentiment. Quote, "Yang stressed that China-US relations have encountered severe difficulties due to a series of wrongdoings by the US side that interfered in China's internal affairs and undermine China's interests." End quote. And finally, with all this talk of Xi Jinping thought in recent months, some of you guys have asked me, what exactly does Xi Jinping thought entail? What is this grand ideology that is getting so much attention in China at the moment? So I thought for every second or third episode, I would unpack different aspects of Xi Jinping thought as it's described by the party. So here is some commentary from Xi Jinping Thought Q&A series published in the state-run People's Daily this week. This commentary was on defending China from, quote, ideological attacks from the West, end quote. And here are some of the main parts of this commentary on Xi Jinping Thought in state-run People's Daily. Quote, "The universal values of freedom, democracy, and human rights advocated by the Western bourgeoisie in modern times played a historical role in the process of opposing feudal autocracy. With the dominance of the bourgeoisie, these values have increasingly become a tool to maintain the rule of capital. The Western bourgeoisie tried its best to beautify these values into universal values and exported and sold them everywhere in order to achieve their global hegemony. Western countries have never stopped trying to infiltrate their values into China and to westernize and divide China, and they are constantly revamping their tricks and intensifying their efforts. They use elaborate deceptions to hide their malicious intent. To oppose the so-called universal values in the West, the foothold lies in strengthening values and self-confidence. With regard to the so-called universal values in the West, we should always keep a clear head, dare to fight, dare to show our swords, and resolutely resist the smearing of our party, our socialist system, and the cultural traditions from so-called universal values, end quote. Okay guys, that's this episode of China Update. Throw your comments below. I always love hearing from you guys. Thank you for watching. Wherever you are, I hope you're keeping safe and keeping sane. I will see you guys next time on China Update.